Greetings, this is Griff Ruby with the part 34 of my series Ecclesiology for Sedevacantists, based on Dogmatic Theology, Volume 2, Christ Church by Msgr G. von Noort. Picking up where we left off, we had just made an assertion about the Church's infallibility extending to certain dogmatic facts. We're on page 113. Proof 1. From the purpose of infallibility, the Church is infallible in those related matters in which an error would constitute a danger to the faith, but dogmatic facts are matters of this kind. The reason should be obvious from the example alleged above. What good would it do to proclaim in theory the infallible authority of ecumenical councils if one could licitly doubt the legitimacy of a specific council? What good would it do to acknowledge the inspiration of the sacred books in their original forms long ago extinct, if one could not definitively establish the substantial fidelity of the copies of the original and the translations which the Church has to use? Could Christians be effectively protected against errors in their faith if the Church could not warn against them and against their poisonous fare, such as are books which contain heresy or errors in religious matters? From the practice of the Church, which a. often resolutely and officially repudiated heretical writings, as e.g. the Thalia of Arius in the Council of Nicaea or the works of Nestorius in the Council of Ephesus, declared the Vulgate to be authentic at the Council of Trent, and the canon of the Mass to be free of any error. Asserted specifically in the case of Jansen that reverent silence about a dogmatic fact is not at all adequate, but that all faithful Christians must condemn as heretical in their hearts as well as with their lips the opinions which the Church has condemned in the 5 aforementioned propositions of Jansen's books, opinions which the very words of those propositions quite clearly state. A famous objection is that concerned with the 3 chapters: Theodore, Bishop of Mopsuestia, and his works, some of the works of Theodoret, Bishop of Cyrrhus, and letter of Ibas, the priest of Edessa, to Maris of Persia, all of which works favored Nestorianism. The Council of Chalcedon is said to have approved these works, and the Second Council of Constantinople and Pope Vigilius subsequently to have condemned them. Consequently, they say, at least one of them was in error about a dogmatic fact. But this conclusion is not justified, for although the Fathers of Chalcedon, after having expressly condemned Nestorianism, accepted Theodore and Ibas as members of the council, they passed no explicit decision regarding the 3 chapters. Corollary. The Church does not usually pass judgment directly on the dogmatic fact itself, but on the proposition which, through the medium of a dogmatic fact, is deduced from a revealed premise, either through a true reasoning process or through a merely explanatory syllogism. Of course, whatever the Church declares directly must be maintained by everyone. E.g., the Vulgate contains the Word of God. Pius XII is the head of the Church. That the doctrine of this or that book is heretical. It arrived at these decisions in the following matter. Every faithful translation of the inspired books contains the words of God, but the Vulgate is a faithful translation. Therefore, anyone legitimately elected Bishop of Rome is head of the Church, but Pius XII was legitimately elected. Therefore, any book containing this doctrine is heretical, but such and such book contains this doctrine. Therefore, since the Church's decision is concerned more directly with the conclusion deduced from the revelation with the help of a dogmatic fact, rather than with the dogmatic fact itself, which is assumed in the decision rather than directly affirmed. Dogmatic facts can rightly be called not only secondary but also indirect objects of infallibility. It may help to mention that several theologians treat this question a bit differently, for they understand the term dogmatic fact not a premise drawn from history on which the conclusion would depend, as in the examples above, but the conclusion itself, e.g., the Vulgate contains the Word of God, or that such and such a book is heretical. If one prefers this view of the matter, he will then define a dogmatic fact in the words of the illustrious de Groot as a fact in which a doctrine is expressed. One may wonder what name is to be given the conclusion following the view proposed above. To answer that, a distinction is necessary. If the conclusion is the result of a real reasoning process, it is to be called a theological conclusion, But if the syllogism is merely explanatory, then it expresses a truth formally but implicitly revealed. The precise meaning of this distinction would be explained in the Treatise on Faith, which would be another volume. Now, out of all this emerges the rather, I think, significant question. So, what are we to make about the evident failure, on the one hand, of the Vatican organization to be the church, but at the same time, you see, all these other indirect dogmatic facts, Pius XII is Pope, the Vulgate is the real Word of God, and so forth, that you could know. And it's like suddenly you can't know these things because they're so blatantly contradictory to other things we know. You have to find the break somewhere. And that break has to be someplace clean, clear, and official. And I don't know why more emphasis hasn't been put by others. I seem to be the only one, it feels like sometimes, making it clear. That break took place in 1964. At that point, when they promulgated Lumen Gentium, they defined a different state of affairs in which all the stuff we saw, which since then is no real contradiction with what's gone before, because basically the Vatican organization as an organization is not the church anymore. So its leader is not Pope, its documents are not infallible, they're very fallible, and these findings are of course entirely consistent with what every Catholic who's even the least bit informed about what the teachings are can just see for themselves, and have been seeing from this whole time. They've been saying something's really wrong. They didn't know what, they didn't know where, they didn't know how, but boy, it was inescapably, undeniably wrong. Now, where did this happen? How did this happen? Where did this begin? At what point do we need to stop trusting? At what point do we need to say, no, this is where something happened right here. This is how it happened. This is who has it now, in terms of all the infallibility and so forth, who is still the church. And if you can identify that moment, you say, that's what this does. That's what my thesis does regarding the Lumen Gentium. It does all of that. And that's why that's so important. I don't understand how that doesn't seem to register with others. Anyway, that's enough for part 34. Thank you.